Hello, everyone. It's Adam Caplan here for Inside the Birds. It is week number 6. The Eagles are back from their bye. They will actually be at home for a 1 o'clock Eastern game. We look forward to actually having a game done by 4 Eastern. We love that. And in for the great Jeffrey Mosher is an even greater Andrew DiCecco. Andrew, great to see you again.
Adam, always good to be with you. How's everything?
Good, I'm doing well. I hope you're doing well. And I know you've been at NovaCare. We'll get to that. Yeah, I know you've talked to a bunch of players. We want to get your report. No question about that. And before we get to interesting transaction, you and I have not talked, so I don't know. I know you wrote about the Devin White situation, but you were at training camp more than I was. You and I exchanged a lot of notes when we were there, but because people don't seem to want to believe us, what we gave like basically exactly what happened on Monday, but
hmm
people don't want to believe us. So, what is your view, and what do you know about the Devin White release, just in terms of what really happened with him from training camp?
Well, Devin White got all the first team reps except for the practice in Foxborough, the open practice or the joint practice where I was at. That was the Kobe Dean who got the start. But that doesn't always indicate that a player is going to be the starter. Sometimes getting all that exposure kind of works against you. And in the case of Devin White, maybe it reaffirmed perhaps the player that he was throughout his career, the enigmatic type of player, the sporadically productive guy who is kind of goes rogue and doesn't have the best eye discipline and kind of, a lot is placed on the linebackers in Vic Fangio's defense. And I think it was very evident over the second half of training camp where Nakobe Dean started to get his footing and he was making less mistakes and he was playing a lot faster, that he was beginning to overtake Devin White. And Devin White, to me, was always a tick slow in coverage. The athleticism was never a question, but it was a matter of if he doesn't start for you, where does he fit? He doesn't play special teams, so he wasn't going to be active on game day. And I think ultimately he just got surpassed, and you started to see players like Zach Bond and Nakobe Dean, younger players like Jeremiah Trotter Jr. and Ben Van Sumeren, who just grasped the system a lot faster. Seemed like the Eagles trusted them a lot more, at least from my vantage point. And I think ultimately you saw Devin White sort of slowly fall out of favor. And by the end of the training camp, everyone who was there, it really wasn't a discussion. It was just very obvious.
It's funny because I remember going on Mike Gill's show, and I said to Mike, I said, if Nakobe Dean's not starting week 1, there's something we're missing. There's something obviously we don't know. And I noticed when at the end of training camp, okay, White would be the first guy in, but they'd start rotating. It was White and Dean, so it was very close in terms of the snap count. It was clearly White, and then the last couple weeks of training camp, Dean evened it up. And don't forget also, Burks got healthy. He was out, 3 weeks after getting hurt the first day. So they were just out of jobs. And you just talked about it. The term is actually called hero ball. When coaches will tell you, this is something I got when I first started covering the league in the early 2000s. Hero ball refers to, oh, not only will I do my job, I'll do yours. So if I see a play that I like, I'm going to go out of structure and I'm going to try to make a play over you. And that's basically the story of Devin White's career, because he's so gifted, is that he just could not be happy doing his own job. He tried to do other people's job. That's kind of what you're talking about in the freelancing. And that'll get you benched. And when you talk about guys who do what the coaches ask, like Trotter, Van Sumer, I know you've gotten to talk to Ben since he was signed last year, who's been a nice story of development. He's got a potential future with the Eagles. There's just nothing left for him. I know a lot of fans just cannot understand why the Eagles wouldn't give him a chance. Bond has been their best linebacker. Would you not agree?
Absolutely. He's exceeded expectations. I don't think anyone could have seen this coming, even the Eagles. But great story. The Kobe Dean's had some turbulent play, I would say,
Up and down.
particularly in the Buccaneers game. He missed a ton of tackles, but I think by and large he's a solid player. I think he's going to continue to get better with more reps. He hasn't gotten a ton of snaps in his career. He's going to be working through that.
Yep.
But I just think that Devin White, there was no place for him. He's an immensely athletic player, but in this system where there's not a lot of rotation at linebacker if they're healthy, and if you don't help on special teams, you're not going to be active. Therefore, there really isn't a role or a spot for him.
Here's a question for you coming out of the bye. We'll stay on inside back and then we'll move on. We know that Trotter now will be the backup Mike, and it's weird because Burks is really a middle linebacker in an odd man front. Whereas we know with the Niners, he was actually in a 43. He played middle linebacker. So it's kind of weird that he's on the other side. But what are your thoughts on Burks now that he's healthy?
I think Burks deserves an opportunity to play as well if they choose to rotate linebackers. Remember, back in the summer, Vic Fangio mentioned that he was sort of averse. In a perfect world, I think he said he would like to have a set pairing of linebackers, which is why you've always seen Dean and N'Kobe Dean and Zach Bond. 3 snaps for Jeremiah Trotter Jr. in the Buccaneers game, but that pretty much illustrates the point that I'm making here, and that barring an injury, you're probably not going to see a lot of rotation there. But for Burks, he's on the roster for a reason. The Eagles obviously really like him. They carried 6 linebackers to start the season, which is extremely heavy, especially for the Eagles. And
Hmm.
I think that kind of illustrates how much they think of him. And I think he will be a factor at some point this season, whether it be situationally or what have you. But I think they'll need a call on his experience. 91 games he's played in, I believe 14 starts, and a lights out special teamer.
So moving on, Andrew, the Eagles had a very interesting transaction, which I didn't see coming, and we'll get into it. So they released Caden Stearns again. That wasn't a surprise, but he's back for another tour of duty. CJ Uzama, Andrew, he's on the practice squad. He replaces Stearns, and we'll get
Wearing
into
number
it.
47. He wears number
Oh,
47, by the way.
where's number 47? Okay, that's interesting. That could be a long snapper, by the way.
Yeah.
Uh, okay, so give us the bird's eye view of training camp. I thought he moved too slow, but what did you see from him, and why do you think they cut him?
He did not move very well in training camp, and he dropped the football a little bit more than I was expecting to see. Now, on paper, it seemed to be that he was going to be the second tight end. You like him for his blocking, the experience,
Yep.
but Grant Calcaterra separated pretty quickly in training camp, and it was very evident that he provided more of a spark, more juice in the passing game. Doesn't give you the blocking acumen that maybe a CJ Uzama does, but I just think it was very apparent that it didn't, at least to me, it didn't look like CJ Uzama had a ton left, and he got released before the final preseason game.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, I think that's kind of doing a veteran a solid to allow him to latch on someplace else. But I think it's interesting to bring him back right now at this time. You can it never hurts to have that many veterans in a room that can kind of bounce ideas off of each other.
Yeah, so yeah, no question. See, here's what happened. So let's say Jack Stoll got hurt, who's really their wide tight end. He when they play 12 personnel, he'll switch off with Calcaterra, but when Stoll's in there, he's going to be blocking.
Mm-hmm.
Calcaterra simply does not block well enough. I know he's trying harder at it. They think he's made some improvement. He's just not there. He's clearly not there. But if Stoll were to suffer an injury and they didn't bring back Uzama, AJ Jenkins clearly is not ready to be a backup Y. He's a converted receiver.
He's
So
gotten
that's
a
going
lot better. He's gotten a lot better as a blocker, and I thought that kind of that really showed on tape during the preseason. I thought that, and that
preseason,
was a
yes.
point of emphasis. He worked with tight ends coach Jason Michael and tried to really round out his skill set because he was a receiving centric tight end, put on a lot of weight to become more of a well-rounded player. But to your point, Adam, yes, I would say that Uzama, obviously, he's done it at the NFL level at a varying degrees of success. He gives you some stability there should anything happen to Jack Stoll. But I have to wonder if there are any teams that were clamoring for his services. Like,
Hmm.
why sign him at this time?
Well, no, but again, it's a practice squad transaction, so they could let CJ kind of work through it. I'm surprised though, because you and I saw the same thing. I didn't think Uzama could run anymore. I because that was our big question, because we penciled him in to be the backup Y, or to be actually the Y, to be the number 2 tight end, as you mentioned when we were previewing training camp. Oh, well, here's their backup Y, and Jeff said, well, just as long as he looks like he's still playing. When I was at training camp and I saw you there, I was like, wow, I don't think this guy can move anymore. I was kind of disappointed. And you mentioned the drops, so the Eagles liked him enough to at least bring him back. But they need to have an answer if Jack Stoll gets hurt, because Calcaterra clearly can't do it. EJ Jenkins is not ready. And as you just mentioned, Uzama's been there and done that. But the question is that how many snaps can he handle? Their hope is they don't have to get there. They don't have to learn.
Right.
So we'll see what happens. So that was interesting. And then we had a couple questions about this, and we'll address it. You and I kind of know, and I could give you a little bit of insight past to what people may know. So the Eagles worked out a left-footed punter, Colton Spangler, on Tuesday. So Andrew, give me your thoughts on this one. I saw this a mile away, because this has been Colton Spangler is the workout guy for NFL teams, and there's a reason for it. What are your thoughts on this?
So he's a left-footed punter, and the Browns punter is left-footed. So a
Yep.
lot of times teams will bring in a punter like that to kind of give an idea of what the ball is going to look like off the foot, and it helps the returners a lot. So I think that that was a savvy move by the Eagles, and a lot of teams adopt that philosophy.
Yeah, so what they're looking for is you could tape the workout, they'll bring it into the special teams room. What they want to do is they want to see the spin come off of the guy's foot. It's Corey Bojorquez. He's a veteran punter, pretty good. So the guy that used to do it, the workout punter for every NFL team that needed to see him work out and get his tape, the guy's name was Brock Miller. This guy, it was just really fun. It was just kind of comical. He might work out for half the league over like a 5-week period. Like that's just you'd see him like work out 2 or 3 days a week, and no one would ever sign him, poor guy. Or if they did, it might be the practice squad, but he would never get a chance to punt in the game. But anyway, as you just mentioned, that's why they did it. They didn't sign him. He also worked out for another team this week that obviously facing a left-footed punter. There are very few left-footed punters in the National Football League, and that is why they did it. But yeah, that was interesting because people are like, "Oh my God, the Eagles are working on a punter. What's wrong?" No, there's nothing wrong with Braden Mann. He's just right-footed. That was the thing there. So before we move on, definitely want to remind people with Patreon. We had an awesome Andrew. We had an awesome Patreon with Greg Cosell, where it's a really Q&A session. The members take it over and they correspond with Greg, and they talk and they go over stuff, and they get a lot of stuff answered. And this was probably super high level quarterback talk. Hurts, Watson, not much of Watson, mostly Hurts, CJ Stroud, Jane Daniels, who the Eagles are going to face coming up, and really what Greg looks for in a quarterback, what he needs to see to know if the guy's on schedule. I just thought it was really great, and that was half an hour. And I know you would occasionally join us on Wednesdays. Greg is with us on Tuesdays. Wednesday night it's me and Jeff, and sometimes Andrew. Those are usually at 8 p.m. Eastern. We're also on Discord. We've got later this month Ask an Eagle. We're efforting a former Eagles quarterback. We'll let you know if that happens, or John DiFilippo. John just moved, so he's just kind of settling in. And we do a chalk talk with usually former coach or executive. We're looking to get Chuck Pagano on, who, by the way, we've had Chuck on before. He took over once Vic Fangio became the Denver Broncos head coach. And the last time we had him on, it was really interesting to see how he had to keep their defense and learn what Vic did. I thought that was fascinating. If you want to sign up, you should. It's patreon.com/InsideTheBirds for more.
Hey, before Adam and Andrew go on, remember, Red October is over. The Phillies have left a void, but nothing replaces that void like NBA basketball and the 76ers. There's a lot of hype over this year's Sixers team with Paul George, and there's nothing like going to an NBA game, right? You got the celebrity sightings in the front row. You get the squeaky sound of the sneakers from the court, the feel of the crowd. I love going to NBA games because the momentum shifts are just incredible. You see the Sixers go on a run and the whole stadium ignites. It's a fantastic experience. And that experience can be made even better if you get your tickets using Game Time. Game Time's got the function called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. It filters out all the fluff to only show you the incredible deals on the great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. All right. We got the Sixers preseason around the corner, and then next thing you'll know, there'll be Sixers games. You're going to want to take advantage of the super deal, as well as the other great tiers of deals that they offer, where you find the best value for the section of the arena. It's a great experience. It's an easy experience. It's very user-friendly. And remember that your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. It comes with event cancellation protection and job loss protection. They've got the lowest price guarantee, where Game Time credits you 110% of the difference if you find a better price. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code BIRDS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code BIRDS, BIRDS, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time.
So let's get to the injury updates. This one was new. This surprised me because I don't remember seeing it. Nakobe Dean with the ankle. Do you remember seeing that in the Tampa Bay game?
No, but my understanding is that he got a little banged up in the Tampa Bay game. That's where it occurred. but it doesn't seem like it's going to be an issue that's going to hold him out of Sunday's game. At
Okay.
least that to my knowledge, it doesn't seem like it's anything serious.
Okay, he didn't take all his first team reps on Wednesday and Thursday, but you just heard Andrew's update. And then everyone else is good to go. Reed Blankenship's over the illness. Remember, he had food poisoning. Apparently, what Vic Fangio said. Vic's been good with the information. AJ Brown, barring a setback, will be in the lineup with a hamstring. He took all his reps on Thursday. This is interesting, Andrew. Eagles have one roster spot open after cutting Dean. Sidney Brown got whatever prescribed reps they asked him to take. He took all of them. No setback. Lane Johnson's good to go. Barring a setback. Anaya Smith, we're going to talk to him in a couple minutes. I know you got some information on him. Devontae Smith is good to go with a concussion. That's great news. Johnny Wilson had a concussion. It's good to go. So, Andrew, let's get to it. What do you know about Anaya Smith with the ankle?
So I got a chance to talk to him 2 days ago, and he said it's showtime. He said he got the information that that the window was opening for him as he was actually driving into the NovaCare complex on Monday. And this is someone who, having that time off, that 5 weeks to kind of collect yourself, reflect, it allowed him to get stronger, faster, understand what defenses are doing pre-snap. I just think it allowed him to have a better grasp on the game, and he's not pressing as much. It seemed like he was able to take what he learned from the summer, where later in the summer he started to stack some positive plays after getting off to a shaky start, and he's fielding punts a lot better from what I've seen the end of summer and today. But I think that it offered him a different perspective, and I do believe that he's going to be ready now should he be called upon at some point to help the Eagles. And while the Eagles were traveling, he was back in Philadelphia putting in work, and he really talked about all the work that he was putting in behind the scenes to make sure that he was up to speed and ready for his next opportunity.
Did he talk about the injury? Did he talk about that at all? And also, obviously, the stress fracture, which he had, was discovered at the combine. Did he happen to
Yeah, I
talk
talked to him about the stress fracture after the Eagles-Ravens preseason game, and he talked about how that was impacting him more than he was letting on. He said it still wasn't. I wrote a story about it, and he talked
Yeah.
about how it had been plaguing him, but he didn't want to make excuses, and talk about the rehab process to get that right. But the injury that he sustained, the most recent one that placed him on IR, was that it was in the preseason finale, and he had the ankle. I didn't really ask him about that, but I asked him
Sure.
about the rehab process and how he was working through that.
So let's get back to Nia Smith and what happened in training camp. Was it just the drops? What happened with him the first couple of weeks?
Well, it seemed like there was concentration drops. He didn't have the most stable in terms of punt return. His hands weren't as consistent as you'd like. It just seemed to me like it was a rookie who was pressing, and a lot of times you don't get instantaneous results. Players progress at different rates, and I think that's something that isn't often taken into account. When you look at a young player, everybody wants them to get out of the gate strong and fast and be the player that they were in college, and sometimes it doesn't happen that way at the NFL level. Players are going to make mistakes. They're going to have to work through growing pains, and I think for Anias, you saw Johnny Wilson, who was drafted in the 6th round, who got off to a pretty fast start, but for Anias, it took a little bit of time. But you started to see the small signs, the moderate signs of a player who can round into form eventually when there's an opportunity. But it's really interesting now because if Cooper DeJean undertakes a more prominent role on defense,
We get to that.
well, and Britton Covey's going to be out probably through the Jaguars game, I would imagine. Then it becomes interesting. Like, is there a role for Anaya Smith? I have to think that there's probably not right now, but the Eagles have proven that they've needed receivers. Paris Campbell's out of elevation. He's already had 3. So you just don't know. But I think everything that I've been able to glean from Anias seems like he's taken that time to really develop his game and also to get stronger physically.
Okay, so going in this game right now, they only have 4 receivers on the 53: Brown, Dotson, Smith, and Wilson. And by all accounts, Brown's ready to go. Wilson looks like he's going to get fully cleared, but you can't go into a game with 4 receivers. They need 5th. So on your point, could it be a Nia Smith that's activated? They add him to the roster off of IR. He'd be the 5th. You don't really need 6. You've got Danny Gray, who's new. John Ross, who was elevated, for that one game against Tampa. Kyle Phillips is yet to play for them,
yeah.
right? And Jack Saint, who's yet to play for them. So it seemed to me, based on what you're telling me, at least on the health and just they have to have 5 receivers. So boy, there's a realistic chance that we'll get to Sidney Brown in a minute, that Anais could be ready this week, right? He's working. I mean, they list him as getting a full practice. So to me, he's progressing really well here.
He's working, but the question that I have is, how does he fit into the equation, right? If he's not going to run down and cover kicks, if your punt returner is Cooper DeJean,
Yeah.
how does Anais factor in versus somebody that you can elevate, maybe like a John Ross? You know, I think Sidney
Good
Brown would be
question.
I think Sidney Brown would be the more logical fit.
Right.
And to Sidney's credit, he's looked extremely sharp,
Oh
moving
yeah.
lateral movements in training camp. When he was working off on a side field, he had a positive attitude through the whole process, and it just seemed to me like he was raring to go. That to me would be the most logical for the spot number 53.
Yeah, and on your point, the one thing that really I wanted to get to this, the one thing that hurts Anais Smith, he's really an inside receiver. Where Dotson, I know Dotson's struggling. That's not the point. The point, he could play inside or outside. Devontae Smith's numbers last year inside were phenomenal. So they don't really need an inside receiver. It's one thing if Anais Smith could play outside. If they felt like he definitely could be an outside receiver, then that would change everything. Then it would be a layup, but it's not. But yes, it would make sense if he's healthy to put him on there as we suggested. But you made a good point. It's about fit right now. And boy, John Ross, let's talk about John Ross. What did you see from him in training camp? Because I was kind of surprised they brought him back, quite frankly.
I thought he made some plays when the ball was thrown in his direction. He still has the speed to separate down the field, but not a physical player. Doesn't play well through contact. Having a veteran in the room never hurts. Having someone with that kind of experience, but I was surprised that they brought him back, given that they have a young group of receivers that I think are worth developing. But you know, with 16 or 17 spots really on the practice squad, you can kind of you can afford to have that luxury to bring someone back like John Ross, a veteran.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that. So looking at their injury situation, okay, let's get to Sidney Brown. So I watched him run in August. I was like, boy, this guy looks like he's ready to go, but I get it. You want to give the full 9 months on the ACL rehab, and it's great. He certainly could be activated this week. And the trend in the NFL is teams don't take the 21 days of, and I get it. The staff's new to him. He hasn't practiced since last January. He got hurt January 7th. But the fact of the matter is, they're kind of thin at safety. I know that Brown gets knocked first tackling, but he also could hit and he can knock guys over him. And the guy really came on late last season when he was not in nickel. The other role was pretty good. So what are your feelings about Sidney Brown potentially being activated?
I think that expectations should be tempered because this is a player who, prior to Wednesday's practice, that was his first practice coming with the window open, that he was able to actually get physical reps in Vic Fangio's defense. And for someone who is behind on the learning curve, when you look at all the other safeties that they've had a full spring and summer repping in that defense, I think that he can certainly help you in sub packages. He's a very physical player around the line of scrimmage and affecting the running game. So that's certainly an area that you can probably plug him in. But in order to I guess, undertake a more prominent role and a larger size of the snap share, I think that's going to take a little bit of time.
Yeah, certainly. Look, he's a better option than McCollum. We know McCollum can help them with special teams, but so can Sidney Brown. So it's fascinating. The good thing is they've gotten really healthy all of a sudden. Whereas as we turn our attention to the Brown situation, Andrew, with their injuries, they're an absolute. They probably the most injured team in the National Football League now. So let's get through this. So offensively, injury wrecked offensive line. Posick, their center, is very questionable. Jack Conklin, the right tackle, is yet to play, coming off ACL injury. He's had other issues. Jedrick Wills has been in and out of the lineup with a knee injury. You've got Wyatt Teller is on injury reserve, who was their starting right guard. Zach Sinter from Michigan, a third-round pick, is filling in for him, he's a rookie. So you gotta be worried about that. Joel Bitonio is the only healthy starter that they have. And I know the Eagles have had problems rushing the passer, but if I'm Clint Hurt, I got those two young guys in the middle of my defense. I think they got to get after it, Andrew.
This is setting up to be a very big Jalen Carter game, and it really has to be. coming off an uneven performance against the Buccaneers, but his performance, Adam, against the Saints was one of the best defensive tackle performances that I've seen in quite some time. He was affecting almost every play, disrupting the line of scrimmage, resetting it, and just, really imposing his will. If the Eagles are able to get that version of Jalen Carter on Sunday, it's going to open things up for the pass rushers on the edge to really get home. And I know a lot's been made of Bryce Huff's slow start. I think having a week off, giving the coordinators a chance to assess, the coaches to assess his play, where they can best find a way to maximize his skill set. He could come out and pick up a sack this week. I think it also has to be taken into account. This is a new defense for him, and it's going to take some time. It goes back to my patience when I was on my soapbox earlier. It takes time for players to kind of work through some things. So if there were ever a week for Bryce Huff to really come alive, this would be the week, Adam. If not, then we're going to be having a different conversation.
Plus, with Watson holding the ball like he is and totally frenetic in the pocket, and he takes his own sacks. It's been an absolute nightmare. You're right, man. This is a good opportunity coming out of the bye. I'm so interested to see what happens with the defense. And everybody knows the Eagles are going to be good this week at receiver. So now it's on the defense. We'll see what happens. But and by the way, we'll have fully updated injury report when we do our pregame show with myself, Jeff, and Greg Cosell. But let's update their defensive injuries, and they got real problems. Myles Garrett's playing with the Achilles ankle problem. He's just not himself. That's a big reason why Jim Schwartz all of a sudden has become a blitzer, Andrew. Mm-hmm. They're a top 5 blitzing team. Who saw that? That's crazy. They're trying what they can. Jordan Hicks had a great year with Minnesota last season. Late in his career, he's hurt. Denzel Ward's got yet another injury. Their best corner, Grant Delpit's got a concussion. Ronnie Hickman, who's been starting at the other position because Juan Thornhill's on injury reserve. Hickman's got an ankle injury. He hasn't practiced yet. Rodney McLeod, our old friend, so Rodney at the Super Bowl. He told me he was going to play another year. He sure did. He's playing, and he might be starting Sunday. They've got problems, Andrew. What before we move on to our next segment, what are your overall thoughts of this Browns team?
Offensively, they're abysmal. I can't put that any simpler, and it all starts with the quarterback. I just don't. I mean, he's averaging 170 yards passing a game. He's making very poor decisions, and he's not playing with a lot of confidence. He's obviously regressed every single season since that 2020 season, and I don't know how you can have a ton of confidence if you're the Browns offense that he's going to be able to sort of jumpstart that offense in any real way. They have plenty of weapons in Amari Cooper. They have Jerry Jeudy. Elijah Moore, I believe, is there as well.
Yep.
They should be able to move the football, and they're just not really able to do so with any sort of consistency, which is why I think it really sets up for the Eagles secondary. And I don't want to say have an afternoon off, but have an afternoon in which they should be able to get their hands on some footballs. But defensively, you have to take notice of what they've been able to do. I think you look at their back end. Greg Newsome's a nice slot player as well. Talked about Emerson and Ward. Ward may not play it. You were saying, right?
Yeah, it doesn't look good. He's been hurt, but see what we think is going to happen because Newsome started his career on the outside, then they move him to nickel.
Yeah, so, he's a longer corner from Northwestern.
Right. So Newsome probably will go outside if Ward can't play. And they also have Cameron Mitchell, who was a 5th rounder last year. Emerson, they really love. I know he's occasionally.
No, Mitchell's also from Northwestern.
Yeah. He was a 5th rounder last year.
But they also have Jeremiah Koromoa at linebacker.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, a really interesting second-level player, moves really well sideline to sideline. The Eagles are going to have to be aware of where he is because he's a player that I could see Jim Schwartz trying to turn loose and create some mismatches on defense. And, of course, Myles Garrett. So they do have some pieces defensively. I know Myles Garrett doesn't look like the Myles Garrett of last year and years prior, but they have enough players there that they could make life difficult for the Eagles offense and specifically Jalen Hurts if they're not on their A game.
So, Andrew, you mentioned earlier, we need to talk about this before we move on, where our expectations, Vic gave it out for the bye, that Cooper DeJean's closing in on the nickel role. We know Devontae Max is really struggling. Let's just assume that DeJean will play a lot of nickel, if not all of them, or certainly he's going to cut into Devontae Max's role, right? Mm-hmm. What are your expectations for DeJean going forward here?
I think it makes a lot of sense to get the startup costs out of the way. You know you're going to rely on Cooper DeJean. You know he's going to be a centerpiece for the secondary for the future. So if you're the Eagles and Vic Fangio, it makes a lot of sense to start either give him the starting spot outright or have him supplement with Avonte Maddox and continue to eat into his snap share. Look, teams are going to target him. He's going to give up some plays. He's going to make some mistakes. That comes with young players when that has to be taken into account and has to be in the understanding when you put a young player out there that there's going to be times where, yeah, they're going to give up some plays. But I think ultimately he gives you tackling prowess, football IQ, increased athleticism on the back end. And you're going to want to try and develop that chemistry between Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, which is going to be really interesting to watch. And I think they have a lot of young pieces there. You want to try to get them reps together so they continue to gel because they haven't gotten a lot of reps together.
Right. And he's got 3 inches on Maddox. Obviously he's younger, Cooper's got his own injury problems that he's had, but he's over them. I'm interested to see, hey, this is a second round pick. And I got to ask you another player. Quinyon Mitchell has been a nice story. What are your thoughts on him from beginning to end so far?
Quinyon Mitchell has been probably the player I've been most impressed with from spring, summer, and through 4 games, Adam. I just think he's been tremendous, better than advertised. And he was my top rated corner coming out of the draft. But I think when you look at his attitude, his physicality, his aversion to backing down from any wide receiver, the moment's not too big for him. And perhaps what I'm most impressed with is his short memory, which a lot of young corners struggle with. He truly lives play to play, good play or bad. He lines it back up and he keeps going. I think that he has an extremely bright future. You'd like to see him convert some of those pass breakups into interceptions, but I think it's coming. Could be as early as this week.
All right, Andrew, hold those thoughts. We're going to move on, and we're going to hear from our friends at Sky Motor Cars.
Sky Motor Cars in Westchester is a different sort of dealership. All it takes is one look at their Highline pre-owned vehicles that people all over the country want and need. Owner Brett Schulter makes sure you don't spend a dime of your money before you purchase the car. Sky Motor Cars allows you to make all the decisions regarding your next vehicle. At Sky Motor Cars, you never have to spend more than necessary. Visit SkyMotorCars.com today or call 610-918-7225.
So, Andrew, Sky Motor Cars, Brett Schulter and his group, they're in Westchester, Pennsylvania, right off 202. Great area. If you're looking for a used car, they sell them cheap. They got high-end cars, lower-end cars. They'll buy, if you're looking to sell a car, they do that as well. And the cool thing, Andrew, is they will ship across the country. I know they sell to people in California. That's SkyMotorCars.com for more information. So let's move on to a guy you've gotten to know, and this guy is so intriguing. I know he's had 1 offensive snap in the last 3 weeks. So that's my man, Will Shipley, 4th round pick out of Clemson. I know you've been talking to him, and we'll get the other players that you've gotten to know. Tell us about what's the latest with Will Shipley.
He actually technically got his first NFL start last week against the Buccaneers.
I saw that.
He was on for the first snap, and he kind of laughed when we talked about it. But this is a player who I think he's really taken his role and he's owned it. He's obsessed over it. And by that, I mean, it might not be in the way that he expected it or the way that he drew it up coming into this season, but as a personal protector on punt, he's really sort of undertaken a more leadership type of role on special teams. And when he's the punt protector, he is really the big communicator and he took full ownership of that gaff in New Orleans, of course, when with the punt block. And that's something that he takes a lot of pride in. And he's never really had to play special teams before, but he's adapting to the role and he's really taken ownership of that. And I talked to him today about pass protection. He's really taken to that. He's sort of turning into, hitting a different gear with that. I thought you saw some signs of him showing improvement throughout training camp. So just a really impressive player to talk to, great person, and somebody who I think is going to continue to see offensive snaps and possibly carve out somewhat of a role as we move forward.
Did he give you any indication so far this season why it's been so quiet for him in terms of snaps, particularly the last 3 games?
No, he said he just kind of goes with the flow and he's ready whenever his number's called. He's someone who, if Saquon or Kenny Gainwell comes off the sideline and he could be a sounding board for them. This is what I'm seeing. He's just taking on the teammate role and trying to be ready for whenever his number's called.
Okay. What else did you learn about the Eagles this week, being around the team, locker room, practice, and all that? What else did you see this week?
So Jalen Hunt will be emulating Myles Garrett this week in practice, which is kind
Ah,
of a critical role considering how fast Myles Garrett can wreck a game. And I think that that's something that if you're Jalen, you're able to go back and really watch film of one of the NFL's premier pass rushers. It's ultimately going to help yourself. And Jalen himself got 5 snaps against the
you
Buccaneers, so
did.
maybe he will factor into the defensive equation maybe on Sunday.
All right, let's talk about Jalen Hunt. Let's go back to training camp. There were some times where I go, wow, okay, I haven't seen that before from this group. I thought sometimes he stood out. I didn't see him a ton, but what were your thoughts when you saw him over the course of training camp?
Ahead of schedule. And something that during the draft process I'd always mention, I wouldn't be so quick to chalk it up as a rookie redshirt. You have to see the player on the field and see how he acclimates to the pro level before you can make any sort of determination. And I think for Jalix, he needs to get stronger at the point of attack. He has to develop a pass rush plan, but man, you see the athleticism, you see the burst around the edge, and once everything really comes together, I think you're going to have a player that the Eagles can throw in a rotation and feel pretty good about it. But he seems to be ahead of schedule from what many were depicting, throughout the whole pre-draft process.
It's true. So before we get out of here, Andrew, we've got the Eagles rookie class, and they've got some returns. What are your thoughts so far? It's only been 4 games. What are your thoughts on this rookie class?
Well, I think you have to feel pretty good about it if you're the Eagles. I mean, Quinyon Mitchell, that looks to be a home run. And again,
Yep.
4 games.
Sure.
Cooper DeJean seems primed to take on a more substantial role on defense, which, I mean, for a second-round pick, you would expect it. But he's healthy, and he's going to be playing. So I think you feel good about that. Jalen Hunt in the 3rd round, we just talked about him. He seems to be, primed for a larger role, or at least cutting into the workload a little bit, I would say. And he's been a force on special teams. He's taken a lot of pride. He takes a lot of pride in that. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. as your backup, Mike. He seems to be somebody that the Eagles have, Vic Fangio in particular, has an affinity for, and he's a really sharp player with a high football IQ. And Johnny Wilson's already contributing as a 6th-round pick. So, I mean, all in all, you have to feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, I mean, the guys, look, if they're getting playing time, that's great. Now, obviously, how well they're playing is up to debate, but I think the big one's DeJean, because him and Mitchell are going to play together for a long time. I'm fascinated to see, because, the Eagles thought, they still do, as we understand, that DeJean could play outside corner. A lot of teams that Jeff and I talked to didn't think he could play at this level, though he played it in college. So I do wonder, now we know that why they're doing this is to get him on the field to play him in nickel. But after the season, they have to make a decision who's going to replace Slay. Is it Mitchell? Excuse me. Is it DeJean? Is it somebody else? That I'm fascinated to see what happens there. And I don't know that they know yet.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think it's still too early to make that determination. If I had to guess right now on October 10th, I mean, I think it would make a lot of sense to say Quinyon Mitchell and maybe Akili Ringo. And then
Really?
whether or not,
Ringo.
whether you see Cooper DeJean as a nickel or a safety, I think that gives you your nucleus for the future.
Yeah, they seem to be hell-bent on him not playing safety. So we'll look, as you said, it's in season now. We're not even done close to the season here. So we're only in the 5th game for them. So we'll see what happens. But this is great, though, that the rookie class is on the field. Last year's class is showing some promise, but they have to perform better. But look, they've got much healthier on offense. We're going to get a look Sunday what Jim Schwartz, the former Eagles defensive coordinator, who came out of semi-retirement. He really wasn't retired. He just took a year off for health reasons, and then he went over he was a consultant for the Titans. But now, he's back again with the Browns here, and I'm interested. Now, let me ask you this question: if somehow I keep being asked this, so I'm going to ask you this question. I'm interested to see how you're going to respond. If they lost Sunday, and obviously you have to see how that would play out. What do you think this would mean for the Eagles going forward to 2-3?
I think that the seat would get hotter, but I don't think the head coach would be in any sort of jeopardy. I really don't. That's not the Eagles' MO. That's not how they do business. Yep. So I think that there would be a lot of conversation about it during the week, but nothing substantial. They're going to move forward to the next game, and they do have a favorable slate of games coming up here. I think that they would just look forward to the next game, and hopefully that if you're the Eagles, you rebound.
Yeah, and when Jeff Lurie fired Chip Kelly, that was, he called a mercy firing. It had to get done. Jeffrey wanted him out of the building. He got him out of the building. So did everybody else. But Jeffrey's always talked about he really likes Nick. So now, if we're late in the season and they get eliminated, they don't make the playoffs for the first time in Nick Sirianni's career. That's when I think it's worth talking about the future. But right now,
week 6 with everything in front of them, I mean, it would make.
They're not the Jets. They're not Woody Johnson. I mean, they're just not. I mean, it's not the way the Eagles do business.
It was just nonsensical.
Yeah. Great job, man. This is great. Look forward to doing this again with you in the future. For Andrew DiCecco, the great Andrew DiCecco, I'm Adam Caplan. We'll see you on our pregame show on Sunday.
Be sure to check out our friends at phlsportsnation.com. They're enhancing the fans' experience with their coverage of all Philadelphia sports teams. For the fan, by the fan is their motto. So make sure you check them out at phlsportsnation.com and on Twitter at phlsportsnation.